Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission today, it's pretty tasty actually. We're diving into a bunch of recent sources all about wild game recipes, specifically for summer cooking, grilling, that kind of thing. Look, Memorial Day is behind us. We're fully into summer now, so it's time to move past the usual winter stuff, right? Like beyond the basic venison jerky or just roasting a turkey breast again. Our goal here is to help you find some fresh, maybe surprising ways to use that wild game you've got stored away. Stuff that really works for, like a backyard barbecue.
Exactly. And these recipes are definitely built for that. They're big on flavor, sure, but also, importantly, they're accessible. They kind of prove that wild game isn't just for chilly weather. It works great for summer parties, BBQs, when you want something impressive, but maybe not too challenging for your guests.
Okay, let's get into it. Where should we start? Maybe with the familiar stuff? American classics, but with a wild game twist. Perfect for maybe someone who's a little hesitant. All right, first one that caught my eye. Beer can pheasant. It's borrowing that whole beer can chicken idea, which everyone loves on the grill, but adapted for pheasant. Now, pheasant, it can get dry real fast. I'm a bit nervous about that. What did the sources say? Any, specific tweaks needed?
Yeah, that's the challenge, isn't it? Pheasant just doesn't have the fat that chicken does. So you're using the steam from the beer, sure, but you need more help.
Yeah.
The sources really agreed on two main things. First, a simple brine. Just salt water overnight, not a marinade, a brine, to get moisture right into the meat itself. Second, butter. Seasoned butter. Rub generously under the skin before you put it on the can. That butter melts and kind of bastes the bird as it cooks. And cook it a bit lower and slower than you might for chicken. Keeps it from drying out.
Oh, okay. So you're adding the fat back, essentially, with the butter. And tackling the moisture problem up front with the brine. Makes sense. Okay, moving on. Let's talk ground meat. This one sounds like fun. Sloppy does. Like Sloppy Joe's, but with ground venison.
Oh, yeah. This is probably the perfect recipe for someone new to wild game, or even a picky eater. Let's be honest, Sloppy Joe's. They kind of rely on a lot of sauce and other flavors anyway. The venison just blends right in. What makes this work, according to the source, is using lots of finely chopped veggies. Peppers, onions, sautéed first. They add moisture and soak up the sauce. And plenty of tangy stuff in the sauce, too. Vinegar, mustard. That acidity really balances any hint of gaminess. It's familiar, comforting, great way to use up ground venison.
Totally. It's a flavor bomb, basically. And the texture of a Sloppy Joe kind of hides any difference between venison and beef anyway. Smart. All right, what if you've got something a bit maybe fancier, like elk? We saw these Jalapeno Elk Meatball Sandwiches. Sounds amazing. The source did say venison works too, but elk was preferred.
Yeah, this one steps it up a notch. The key here is fat. Elk is so lean. If you just make meatballs out of straight elk, they can get dry, crumbly. So the source insists on adding bacon, or maybe a high-fat pork sausage. The ratio they suggested was important. At least 1 part bacon or sausage to 3 parts elk. You get that lean, rich elk flavor, but the bacon fat melts as it cooks, keeping things moist.
Okay, bacon makes sense for moisture, but doesn't it just end up tasting like bacon then? Couldn't you use beef suet or just plain pork fat if you wanted the elk flavor to be the star?
That's a fair point. But the source was aiming for that summer BBQ crowd-pleaser vibe. They chose bacon specifically for its salty, smoky flavor, too. It's not just fat, it's flavor depth that builds a foundation,
Yeah.
Then you add the jalapeno for the heat and brightness and makes the whole thing more complex than just a meatball. Oh, and they also suggested wrapping the meatballs in a little bacon before grilling. Helps hold shape and adds even more moisture.
Oh, okay. So the bacon's doing double duty moisture and flavor base. Gotcha. All right, so we've done comfort food. Let's switch it up. How about dishes with more unexpected flavors? Citrus, spice, stuff that feels good in the heat. First one here, tropical venison quesadilla. The sources seem to think this was maybe the easiest one.
Super simple, yeah.
Yeah.
And really adaptable. But I had a question pop into my head reading about this one. If the whole idea of using wild game is often about local harvest, doesn't adding something like mango, which is definitely not local for most people, kind of go against that? Did they mention that tension?
It's interesting. They didn't frame it as a contradiction, more as a necessary flavor strategy. Their argument was basically that venison can be quite savory, almost earthy. So for summer, you need something really bright and contrasting to cut through that. The mango brings sweetness, yeah, but also that crucial acidity. It's that contrast they were focused on. The method is simple, too. Slow cook some venison until it shreds, like pulled pork. Then just mix that shredded venison with diced mango, some sharp red onion, cheese Monterey Jack was suggested, and grill it in a tortilla.
Yeah.
They really pushed the wild game fiesta angle. Pair it with a margarita or a cold beer. hard to argue with that.
Okay, I see it. The flavor contrast makes sense for summer.
Hmm?
And yeah, once the venison's cooked, putting the quesadilla together is super fast. Good for a party.
All right, next up needs a bit more commitment. Deep fried sriracha turkey. Now, deep frying a turkey isn't new, obviously, but the sriracha, that's the twist. And the timing they mentioned was interesting. This came up in June articles right when spring turkey seasons were ending. So it's like, here's what you do with that bird now.
Right. And what stood out was the source. This wasn't just some blogger's idea. It came from a chef described as tried and true, which means there's probably a specific technique, not just dunking it in hot sauce. And there was. It's about how you use the sriracha. It goes in two places.
Okay, tell us, where does the sriracha go?
First, it's mixed into the injection brine. You're actually injecting sriracha spice liquid deep into the breast meat. That flavors it from the inside out and helps keep it juicy during that intense deep frying heat. Second, you make a sriracha honey glaze. And you brush that on right after it comes out of the fryer. The heat from the bird sets the glaze. So you get internal spice and moisture, and then this sweet, sticky, spicy coating.
Wow, okay, that's much more involved than I thought. Injecting it, that makes a huge difference. It's not just surface heat. Clever. Okay, we've covered easy, we've covered spicy. What about showing off a bit? You know, for the person who wants to look like a real grill master, this last one seems aimed right at them. Grilled and marinated rabbit. The source basically promised this recipe makes you look like you seriously know what you're doing, and the secret. All in the marinade.
That's pretty common for leaner game like rabbit, right? The meat itself is mild, maybe a bit tough, so the marinade has to do the heavy lifting, tenderizing, and flavoring. And this specific one, which they noted came from a Jamie Oliver cookbook, so it's been tested, it hits all those classic flavor notes people love, sweet, salty, garlicky, but with some thought behind it. Let's break down what they used. For saltiness, soy sauce, not just salt, adds that deeper umami thing. For sweet, brown sugar and honey helps with getting that nice crust on the grill. Caramelization. But here's the really key part, I think, the acid. They use two kinds, rice vinegar and lime juice. Why both? The rice vinegar is great for tenderizing, breaking down those rabbit fibers, but the lime juice adds that bright, fresh aplazing you want in summer. It's not just sour, it's fresh. And it needs time. 6 hours minimum overnight is better.
That dual acid approach, that's the kind of detail that makes a difference. Rice vinegar for the texture, lime for the brightness. Yeah, that sounds like something properly developed.
So if we kind of pull all this together, the big takeaway for summer cooking with wild game seems to be you can't just throw it on the grill plane. Every single one of these successful recipes use something extra to balance the leanness. Whether it's added fat, like bacon or butter, or strong contrasting flavors like mango or sriracha, or a really good marinade with acidity, summer is actually a great time to get adventurous. Use those bold ingredients to make the game shine.
Absolutely. And this list gives you options, right? You want fast and easy, quesadilla. Want to impress, elk meatballs or the rabbit. Need something everyone will eat, no questions asked, sloppy does. Covers a lot of ground, from pheasant to turkey to venison and rabbit. So we've seen the goal is twofold. Use your harvest, obviously, but also impress people by making it taste genuinely delicious, balanced. We found these sort of secret ingredients or techniques popping up, adding bacon fat, using acidic fruit like mango, complex marinades with vinegar, injecting spice, which leads to a final thought for you to chew on. If you had to pick just one technique, adding fat, using high contrast fruit, employing complex acidic marinades, or using an injection, which one do you think is the single most powerful secret weapon for transforming almost any basic lean wild game recipe into something special? Something to think about next time you fire up that grill.